I am Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to The Jimbo Paris Show. All right, welcome everyone. This is Jimbo Paris. Welcome to The Jimbo Paris Show. And today we have Mike Konrad, founder and CEO of Aqueous Technology. I'm excited to learn about him. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey, Jimbo. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, man? How you doing?
I'm well on this Saturday afternoon. Things you can't be doing too bad on a Saturday.
You're well. That's good to know.
I was going to say I've had short interviews before, but that was the fastest. How you doing when you get up and walk away?
Oh yeah, my mic is all the way over there, so I had to run over.
No worries, man. No worries. Well, thanks for inviting me on your show. I watched several episodes and I love your content. It's very insightful and inspiring.
Excellent. So, but this show's about you though. So can you kind of tell me specifically who you are?
Well, I'm Mike Konrad, as you mentioned.
Yes.
I refer to myself as a reluctant entrepreneur. I am, by definition, an entrepreneur because people who kind of go off on their own and march to the beat of their own drummer and start a company tend to be entrepreneurs. However, I think what maybe makes me a little bit different, or maybe not, is I didn't intend to be. I didn't have dreams at 10 years old of owning a company and, inventing stuff. I worked for, I'm in the electronic assembly equipment industry, just to put that on a pin on a map. Not that that's important, but just so that people know. We build equipment that builds circuit boards, basically. And I was in an airport with my wife in 1984, a long time ago. And we were in London, and the plane broke down. And we were stuck at the airport for 3 days because they had to fly in another engine. Now, what does that have to do with me? In the course of 3 days of delays, going to hotels, coming back to the gate, hoping the plane would be fixed, going back to the hotel, coming back to the gate, we met an older couple, and we had our 2-year-old with us who was just going crazy. And we befriended this older couple befriended us. And in the course of a few days of conversation, it was, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a sales guy. And I'm not real happy with my job, and I'm looking to do something different. And the guy said, the older gentleman said, well, I'm going to start a company. And we're looking for someone. And it's a startup in Southern California. I was living in Northern California. So long story short, I called him up one day and I said, offer still there? And I flew down to Southern California, had a quick interview, got a job, and eventually moved my family down. Took a few weeks, but moved my family down, and we were transplants to Southern California from Northern California. So now I'm in the electronics assembly equipment industry, which I know nothing about, and quickly start learning, move up in the company, become vice president, which is easy to do when it's a startup. There's like 10 employees, right? So it's not like I went up over 1,000 people's heads,
Okay, yeah.
And then one day, the U.S. government and 10 other countries announced that they were getting rid of a certain chemical, which wouldn't matter to anyone unless they're in this industry. But the chemical was basically chemicals that contain chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, because they were bad for the environment. And they were going to phase those chemicals out in 10 years. They were going to go away in 10 years. And no one believed it, because it would be like the government saying, we're going to ban gasoline in 10 years. It's like, yeah, right. It's not going to happen. But they did. And how that landed in my life was, in our industry, after a circuit board is soldered, all the components are put on and they're all soldered in place, the board would have to then be cleaned. And they were cleaned in chemicals that were going to be banned. And they were very rarely cleaned in anything else. It was mostly these chemicals, these solvents that were going to be banned. And I had an idea. I said, we should get into the cleaning business, and we should come up with an environmentally responsible way to clean. And they said, I don't know. Other people do it. I'm like, yeah, but they don't do it well. We could really do it well. And I tried to talk them into this idea, since it was going to have it's going to be an explosion in business, coming up in the next decade. And they weren't really interested. They just didn't dig that idea. So I finally made them an offer. I said, look, I'll design. I'm consider myself pretty clever. I'm a hack engineer, right? So I said, I'll design the machine. My time, my money, nothing to do with work. And then if I'm successful, I'll bring it to you and see what you think. Okay, fair enough. So I did that. And several months later, brought him a machine. And it happened to be before a big trade show, biggest trade show in North America in our industry, for our industry. So I said, let's just stick it in the booth. I'll put the company name on it. Let's just stick it in the booth, see what happens. And we did, and we sold 5 machines, right off the floor. Sold 5 machines. So clearly that turned out, I got lucky. That turned out to be a good idea. The problem now was I was building them at night and selling them by day because I owned the equipment and I worked for the company that sold it. So, and it turned out I'm pretty good at designing stuff. I'm not very good at building stuff. My brain and my hands aren't connected. So, long story, a little shorter. I decided, I said, well, I can't build these fast enough. It's clearly benefiting the company. Why don't I just sell you the rights to the machine for what it cost me? I wasn't a great business person back then. I just said, just for what it cost me. Because I was quite naive. I thought, well, if my employer is successful, I will be successful. And so I sold it to him for, I think it was $15,000. That was my out-of-pocket expense way back then. And it was a hit. The company started doing a little better. It was doing poorly before that. It started doing a little better. And then I had these delusions of grandeur in my head. I thought, I'm all that in a bag of chips, as they used to say. It's like I'm a badass now. I'm going to walk into the company and I saved the company and we had a product development meeting, which was to choose the products we were going to develop over the next 2 years. And I thought that I would be carried in on a chariot, fanned with grape leaves, and treated like a king. And so I came up with my next idea, which was a cleaning machine that wouldn't put anything down the drain. It would be completely cut off from the drain. It would recycle 100% of its cleaning fluid. And no one was doing that then. And I thought, well, that's the next level environmental, next level of green. And my boss looked at it and said, nah, I'm not real interested. There's another idea I want to pursue. And I hated the other idea. And I'm like, I think I'm right. I was right on this last idea. I really think I'm right. I think this is what we should do. And then he said one word, Jimbo, one word that started my company. It started with an F. It had 4 letters. And it's not the word you may be thinking. I told him, I think you're wrong. When he said, they're not going to do my idea. I said, I think you're wrong. And he looked at me in the most dismissive way possible, and he goes, fine. Fine, F-I-N-E, fine. That was that 4-letter F, that was an F-bomb for me. That was, we don't care what you did for us before. You don't carry any street cred for that, and we think your idea sucks, and we're going to do something else. Fine. So at that moment, that very second, I started a new company in my head. Obviously not in reality, in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm out. But I was at least smart enough to not bail right away because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a plan. I just had an idea. So I said, okay, fine. So I went home and complained to my wife at how unfair life is and all that. And she said, if it's such a good idea, if you're so hell-bent on building this machine, why are you looking for someone else to pay for it? Why don't you just do it yourself? And it just like bolt of lightning. It was like, wow, she's right. I'm frustrated someone else won't pay for my dream. And if it's my dream, I should own it. So I said, okay, I don't know how we're going to do it. Because back then we couldn't rub 2 nickels together to make a dime. We were just hand to mouth. And so we figured, well, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. And I cleared out everything in our garage, put the cars on the driveway, and made a little mad scientist laboratory in the garage and started working on some designs. And 6 or 8 months later, got a machine that worked, and decided, okay, you know, time to put up or shut up. So I went into my boss and I wrote him a letter, and I told him very clearly that, you know, here's my 2 weeks notice. Thanks for all the opportunity. I enjoyed my 7 years here. Although I'm giving you a 2-week notice, I have to inform you that it's my intent to pursue an idea that might compete with you. So in light of that, I'll be happy to walk out the door this second and not stay for 2 weeks. But I'm giving you a 2 weeks notice if you'd like to take advantage of it. Yeah. He asked me to stay for a month. I'm like, okay, that's cool. We're on everything's chill. We're good. So I left after a month, and literally on my way home from my last day of work, I signed a lease on a small building near my house, industrial building, and started a company. And then 3 months later, this guy drives up to our parking lot, walks in our lobby, asks for me by name, which wasn't unusual. And I go up there and he hands me an envelope. He says, "You've been served." And it turned out it wasn't so cool and chill. It wasn't, rainbows and unicorns. He was angry at me. And it took a lot of years to figure out why. But he was angry at me for leaving. And even though he's the guy that said no, but he was still angry. And he sued me. And we ended up in a 1.5 year long litigation that ended in a trial that just evaporated all the startup money I had, credit cards and savings and family, and tapped everyone. I tapped everyone. I don't think they had caller ID back then because no one would answer my call if they knew I was calling because they knew I was asking for money. But we spent all the money and on lawyers, but we won on everything, and yeah, justice prevailed. And but really, we didn't win. Neither did he. He didn't lose. He didn't win. We both won. We both lost, because those things are not designed to be survivable when you're a young company. Those things are designed to bankrupt you. And I'll tell you, Jimbo, it almost did. We were so low on money at one point. This is the very beginning stages of the internet. So we didn't email catalogs to people like you do today. But I needed to mail a brochure to somebody. Someone needed an overnight quote or something fast. So I don't even think we had a fax machine back then. So we had to mail it. The problem was I had a postage meter, and it was out of postage. And the minimum that the post office would put in at that time was $100. You couldn't put in $10. You had to put in $100 worth of postage to use the meter. And I didn't have $100. So I scrounged through the garbage can looking for stamps that weren't properly canceled so that I could cut out and tape to an envelope and reuse to mail out, a quote. So that's how bad things were. But we survived, and we put certain motions in place, which we could talk about or not. And that was 30 years ago. And we're still here. They're not, but we're still here. And we're thriving. And so that my story is not like a typical business book that tells you all the things you should do right. My story is all the things you shouldn't do, because I made every mistake in the book, and then course corrected over time. I went in blind and full of energy and bravado and ego, and thank God though, because you need those things to get started. Those things will kill your business later. So it took a long time to learn that the certain attributes, certain tricks, certain actions that I had that were very successful from year 1 to year 2, I come in on year 3 and I wave my magic wand of tricks and they don't work anymore. And in fact, they work in the opposite direction. They're bad for business. So then you have to learn new tricks. It's like a video game. Every time you go to another level, there's more monsters, there's more trapdoors, there's fewer lives, there's, all this stuff. It just gets more complicated and harder, and you have to get better. So that was my experience, is avoiding the traps that a lot of entrepreneurs get sucked into. Traps that are set by well-meaning people who are trying to give you good advice. It's not always good advice, and you have to chart your unique course. And everyone's course is a little bit different, but I think we're all in the same general direction, even though we get there slightly differently. We're all, headed north, for example. Some people go northwest and go northeast, but we are all generally headed north. And how you get there varies a little bit, but the journey is very similar for all entrepreneurs, I believe, because I've talked to a lot of them over my years. So that's what I like to talk about. That's what I like to share is learning how to adapt, learning how to bring in new skills or acquire new skills, hire new skills, whatever the case may be. Because 75% of all businesses, Jimbo, 75% of all businesses in the U.S. go out of business within 10 years. That's according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. 75%. That's 25 out of 100 that survive. 75 out of 100 fail. Why is that? Because they all make the same mistakes. That's exactly why. They're playing from the same book, and they all fall into the same trap. And you have to think very differently to avoid those traps.
Okay. And with your story, you mentioned you got through that phase with the lawsuit very quickly. I think we need to get into that a little bit more. Do you think it was the fact that you said that you may be a potential competitor that may have, ticked them off the wrong way?
Yeah, that was part of it. That certainly was an ignition source for the fire. The owner treated me like his son. He had a son, but his son had lost a few businesses over the years, and the owner would express deep frustration about the son, the owner of the company was a very difficult man to work with or live with, I would assume. It's been often said about him, he doesn't get ulcers, he gives ulcers, right? So he was very difficult to work with. And for some reason, because my father was a difficult person, right? My father was kind of an angry man for valid reasons, but he was, I was used to growing up with a father figure that was a difficult person, grumpy, angry, critiquing. And that's how my boss was. So I kind of bonded with him in a kind of weird, paternal type way. We used to go for business dinners, and his wife would come along, and he'd have too much wine, and he'd be a little bit drunk, and the wife would get up and go to the no. He would just before he got up to go to the bathroom or something, he would say, "I just want you to know, Mike, when it's time for me to retire, this is your business. I want you to run this company like it's yours because it will be yours. I am going to give you this business when I retire." And I'm like, "Oh my God, wow, thank you." And then he'd get up and go to the bathroom, and the wife would go, "That's never going to happen. Just so you know, that is never going to happen. It's going to our son, and it's never going to happen." But you didn't hear that from me. So then my boss would come back, and when he left, I was just like on cloud nine, and when he came back, I was just like, WTF? It was like, what just happened here? So, and that repeated itself it almost became comical because that same mantra repeated itself 3 or 4 times over the course of 7 years. And I just knew that whenever he said it wasn't going to happen. And he was right, it didn't happen. But that's kind of the way he felt about me. And so when I left, even though he told me he didn't want my idea, he was very clear about that. Fine, right? So when I competed, he viewed that as, a stab in the heart or probably a stab in the back. And how could me, kind of almost like his son he never had or that he wanted, how could I come back and stab him in the back after he gave me this chance? And from his view, it took a long time to look through the same story I've been telling through his eyes. Through his eyes, yeah, I get it. Logic doesn't play into it. It's all emotion. So the lawsuit was emotion. The lawsuit was an emotion. And I probably could have stopped it. I probably could have come to the table, sat down at the table with him, father-son like, and cleared the air. But when I got sued, my defense mechanisms came up. I was like a peacock, all, feathers out. I'm ready to fight, and I'm thinking, it's like the reason we send 19-year-olds up a mountain to capture a flag, and risk getting shot in the military is because 19-year-olds will do that. People my age will go, no, I'm not doing that. What's in it for me? What are the chances of me dying? How much am I going to get paid? But when you're young, you accept risk, and you accept a battle. You're almost excited about a battle. And that was me. I was cocky. And that just added more fuel to the fire. So, yeah, did I deserve to get sued? No. And that was evidenced by the fact that we won. But did I bring it on? Yeah, I totally brought it on. I could have made it go away, and I chose not to. Not consciously. Certainly subconsciously, I chose to allow it to happen because I was almost excited to win a battle. How dare you? I'll show you. And I showed him, $150,000 later, that I didn't have. So, who wins really?
So, you mentioned a lot of interesting points there, and I think you were in the right there because, well, this is just my opinion, but I think you left in a respectful way. You mentioned I was going to leave in a few months. You agreed to work there. You didn't put your boss in any shocking position. You left in a very respectful way, but he didn't give you that same privilege. And speaking of that way that you left, after that lawsuit, what kind of funding did you get when you were starting your business? Where did that money come from?
I'll tell you, naivety is wonderful to start. You need to be naive to start a business because you need to think you can beat the odds, and the odds are really bad, as I mentioned. So you need naivety, you need arrogance, you need ignorance, which is part of naivety. You need ego, you need bravado, you need luck, and you need money. And I had all those except the money. So I wrote a business plan, and I think I went to the bookstore, and I don't think I bought the book. I think I sat in the aisles and read the book, certain parts of it. And then I wrote a business plan, and I took it to a bank and asked them for money. And I did all these projections and all this stuff. And of course, the bank was kind enough not to laugh me out. They said, okay, well, thank you. They asked me a couple questions, and they said, well, we'll mail you our decision. And 2 weeks later, I get the, sorry, thanks for applying, but. And then I applied to a few more banks, and they said no. And we had already racked up all our credit cards. We were maxed out. My wife was working, thankfully, so we could at least pay the mortgage and eat, right? We weren't starving, but we didn't have any money to run the business. So finally, I went to the least likely person that I knew, and that was my dad. And I say least likely because my dad was, I always called him the cheapest man on the planet. He was probably the millionaire next door, but I didn't know it. And he was extremely frugal. Both my parents were immigrants. He was Eastern European, so he had a hard life when he was young, very, very hard life. And coming to this country was a dream for him. He was living his American dream, and he wasn't going to squander it. So every penny was saved. So I thought, well, doesn't hurt. I'll kick myself if I don't ask. But I know the answer will be no, but I need to check it off the list. So I shared my business plan with him, and at that time I asked for $35,000, which I thought might as well be $35 million. I didn't even know what 35,000 looked like. So I pitched him on the business and business idea, and he said, okay, well, let me talk to your mother, and we'll get back to you in a few days, which as a kid, when your parents go, let me think about it, that's always no, right? It's just a kind of a deferred no. So I'm like, okay, well, thanks for not saying no right away. So a few days later, summons my wife and I to his house, to my mother and his house. And he says, okay, Michael, your mother and I have talked about it, and we don't think it would be a wise idea to loan you $35,000. And I'm like, my concession speech is already there. I'm like, oh, I totally get it, Dad. Thanks just for listening. You helped me, polish my pitch. And he goes, you're going to need 70. And I'm like, say again? He goes, we're going to give you 70 because we ran the numbers and we think 35 is about half as much as you need. You're going to need 70. And he took a loan out on his house to give me the 70. Because I guess he had some money, but it was all like tied up or something. I don't know. Who knows? But next thing you know, I have access to $70,000, which I thought was 70 million, 70 trillion. You know, I thought I was Warren Buffett. Didn't even know Warren Buffett back then, but know of him. But now I do. So I thought, okay, we're in. We're guaranteed. And then, like literally a month later, we got sued, and you know, that money started disappearing very, very quickly. So when we were running out of money, we got an order. I remember one day we got an order for like a $10,000 machine or something, and I'm like, we can't take the order. We don't have the money to buy the parts. We can't take the order. This is the beginning of the end. So I called the customer, and I said, didn't tell them we were being sued and all that. I just said, our terms are 50% down, 50% net 30 after delivery. And he goes, we're not going to pay any money down. And I didn't argue. There was no pushback because I had no choice. I just said, well, okay, I totally understand that. I respect that, but we can't do business unless that's the payment term. That's just the way it is. Not argue, just stand firm, don't push back. And they gave us the half down. So we took half the half and paid the attorney and half the half and bought parts. And then when we got paid the other half, we took half of the half and paid the attorney and took the other half and made payroll, and rent and whatever. And we kept doing that. Every single customer gave us money up front. That helped us buy parts, helped us pay the lawyer, helped us keep the company alive. Nobody said no. We didn't lose a single order. And no one in our industry did that. We were all net 30, net 60, net 90. Everyone had terms. We couldn't afford to do terms because our money was leaving artificially for the lawsuit. But customers stepped up. The universe said, I got your back. Just do the right thing. I got your back. That's what it felt like. Probably not then. Looking back on it now, that's what it feels like. So we kept going. And then we won the lawsuit, and it took another 2 years to pay off the attorney. And when we paid her last payment, she called me up and she goes, Mike, I never thought I would see this money. I was ready to write it off, $50,000 ago. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't know that then because I may have taken you up on it. But she goes, I stuck with you. And she could have sued us for the money. She could have, made a legal claim. She didn't. We just paid her regularly. Every time we got money in, we paid her half of pretty much everything we got in. Or not quite that much. But within 2 years, we paid her down to zero. And it felt good. I'm still friends with her 30 years later. And then we started licking our wounds and building the company. And that's what we've done over the last 30 years is we built a company kind of out of the ashes. The company started very quickly and then quickly burned with the lawsuit and all that. And then, we put it back together. And I'm grateful now, looking back. I'm grateful for the lawsuit. Who thought I'd ever say that? But it made me smarter. It made me wiser. It made me do things that I would not do because I would be afraid to ask customers for terms like that. It taught me a lot of lessons, which I ironically didn't learn right away. It took a long time for those lessons to sink in. But if we didn't get sued, I don't know if we would have been hardened enough to survive all the other recessions and pandemics and terrorist attacks and all the things that economic cycles go through. I think we survived that. We were battle hardened, and we were wiser. And then you get older. I'm 62 now. I started the company when I was 31. So half my life has been in this company. And so you get wiser. You either go out of business or you get smart. Or you surround yourself with smart. One of the two. Hopefully both. And it helps sustain a company. Another thing I learned, Jimbo, was there's a seduction of growth. All your business colleagues, ask you, what's your growth plan? How much are you going to grow? You should grow 20% a year. You should grow 50% a year. And we fell, we were seduced by that. We got to grow. I belonged many years ago to a CEO peer group where all these CEOs would come together and talk about their companies and show their financials, and it was quite humbling to do. And everyone was talking about growth. Mike, you haven't grown. You only grew 8% last year. That's terrible. What are you going to do to grow? And so we were trying to grow. And when you come from a sales background like I have, it's pretty easy to grow. I'm a pretty good salesman, and my team knew how to sell. But if you just tell people you need more, they're going to bring more, but none of it's going to be profitable. It's all going to be bad sales. It's going to be discounted. It's going to be long payment terms. So we fell victim to that. And all of a sudden, we went from having money up front with every sale, so much so that we could pay the attorney and we could build our company. We went from that to giving discounts and extended payment terms. And then we were right back in the same trap. So we hung up the idea of growth, and we switched that with build the best machine we can, service the customers the best we can, best in the industry, best in class. And if growth is meant to happen, growth will come out of that. Build something right, make a difference in the world. Now that sounds a little crazy. It sounds like a little new agey kind of whatever, but I'm a strong believer in you have to be bigger than yourself. Your mission has to be bigger than you. Your company has to be bigger than the company. It has to be something audacious. You have to make the world a better place. You have to change the world somehow for the better. So I believe if you have the giant goal in mind and you do it right, treat your people well, you treat your customers well, you build the best-in-class equipment, profit and growth are a result of that. If you chase profit and growth, you're going to get some of it, but not sustainable. And so you just have to just trust that there's some business god out there that makes it right. And you hear a lot of people talking about abundance. I think I heard some of your past guests talk about abundance on your show.
Yes.
And I don't want to overuse that word, but I believe that when everything is in order, there is abundance. You have everything you need. And I don't think abundance means, hoarding riches beyond what you need. I think abundance doesn't always apply financially. It applies so many other different ways. But when you do things right, there is abundance. And abundance means you can pay your bills. Abundance means you can grow if you need to grow, if that's what's meant to happen. Abundance means you're surrounded by smart people, an abundance of talent, an abundance of wisdom, whatever you need at that moment. So for that to happen, I had to hang up my ego, because I had an ego. If an ego was a hat, I'd have to turn it sideways to get through a door. It would knock off my head every time I went through a doorway, because I had a pretty big ego. And thank God I had a big ego, because I couldn't have started this business without that. But at some point, you have to let go of those startup traits and substitute them with more business savvy traits appropriate for the stage of business you're at. And I think if you're just open to bringing in what's next, it happens at the right time. If I knew everything I knew today, back when I started the business, I wouldn't have started the business. Not because I regret it. I regret nothing. But I would be too aware of the risks. And I would be too aware of how close to the edge to business death we came, right? A few times. And I don't want to go through that again, even though I embrace what we went through. I have gratitude what we went through. I don't want to do it again. So I think the growth comes at the right time. When you're ready for the next stage of growth, then the skill sets come and the money comes, if that's what's required. It comes at its own unique timing. Not a moment too soon, not a moment too late, if you're open to it. So it took a while to get rid of those old traits. And I liken it to, I like the traits required to start a business, much like the gears in a car. Jimbo, have you ever driven a manual transmission car? A stick shift?
No,
No. Younger people generally haven't had that experience, but I grew up on stick shift. So you had a clutch, you had, first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. You had to move them all manually. The skills required to start a company are your first gear in a car. First gear, you can't go more than about 20 miles an hour in first gear. And you're revving. You're going, your tachometer is up at 7,000, doing 20 miles an hour because you're in this super, super, super low gear. That's the skills required to start a company. Highly leveraged. You can't go far with it, but you can certainly get it started. You can't start a car in fifth gear. You can't. If you were in fifth gear, the car would just burn up the clutch. There's not enough torque. There's not enough of a ratio in the transmission to the engine to get it going. So you can't start with all the skills, I don't believe, that Warren Buffett has. Because you'll just say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too risky. But so the skills required to start a business, naivety, ego, arrogance, ignorance, poor assessment of risk, all those skills are great to start a company. They're your first gear. But you can't drive past the other end of the intersection in first gear or you'll burn up your car. You have to shift to second. And second is a different set of skills. And then you can't go too far in second gear. You have to shift to third. And then you have to shift to fifth. And the car I drive right now, which is an automatic, it's a 10-speed automatic. There's 10 gears in there. That's a lot of different gears, but each one has a purpose. Each one has the right ratio of the right gear ratio for that speed. And that's very similar in business. You just have to shift to the next skill set and let the other one go. And if your company fails and you have to start all over, bring back first gear and open up that ego, welcome them back, right? And the arrogance and all that. But at some point you have to let that stuff go. The sheer desire to grow, that's good the first year. Because, you have to grow. You have to sell something, right? That's growth.
Yeah.
But at some point, it's like, no, that shouldn't be your first goal. At some point, maybe that's third or fourth gear. But at some point, you have to shift those gears and those mindsets and those skill sets. And I think that's why 75% of all businesses fail in 10 years. I think it's not because the businesses themselves were bad. I think it's probably because whoever was running the business only had 3 gears in them. That's it. He or she only had 3 gears. So they hit third gear and the business fell apart. It was doing great. And then, year 5 or year 6, it just imploded because they ran out of gears and they ran out of skill sets. And maybe ego or finances or something caused them not to bring in the talent with those new skill sets appropriate for the growth stage they're at in their business. Maybe, I don't know. There could be a million reasons why people don't do it. They don't, they can't, they won't. Won't is probably the biggest one. But I was fortunate. I clearly ran out of skill set at some point, but I acquired it through talent. I started working with people and building a team of people that were smarter than me. I used to famously think I was the smartest person in the room. And when I first started my company, I probably was. Not because I'm that smart, just because I couldn't afford anyone. I didn't have a lot of money, so I wasn't paying very well. So basically, if you had a pulse and a breath, and you promised not to steal from me, you're hired, right? But eventually, I changed my goal to, I want to be the smartest person. I don't want to be the stupidest person in the room. My goal now is to be the stupidest person in my own boardroom or conference room, because I consider myself pretty clever. And if I'm the stupidest person in the room, man, I'm surrounded by smart people, right? And that's what I want to be. I want to learn from them. And if I can't learn it, no problem. Just know I can't do it. And bring people in who can. I'm always inspired by Richard Branson, the CEO of Virgin Group, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Records.
Okay.
Kind of hippie-ish, long hair, jumps out of hot air balloons and
I like that
crazy
guy,
things. He's awesome. He owns more than 100 companies. And how many does he actually run? 0. He has talented teams that run his companies. He's the guy in the hot air balloon. He's the guy in the crow's nest. He's the guy making all the headlines, doing outrageous things. He just started a cruise line. Who starts a cruise line in the middle of a pandemic? Richard Branson. Is he steering a ship? No, of course not. He has people to do that. So, I think we can learn from that example of, know what your skills are, and get out of the way, and bring in people who have the skills that are required.
Yeah, and again, that's extremely tough because, you have to kind of set aside that ego because, if you're a capable person, you could be like, oh, I could do this all on my own. I don't need any help.
Right. Right. And no harm in that. Well, it's not wrongful thinking. It may end up ruining your company, but I can understand why people think that way. I can do this. It's my business. It's mine to be successful or to fail, which is very true. I got lucky. I got incredibly lucky. Statistically, I beat the odds. I had a 75% chance of dying. The business had a 75% chance of dying. Imagine if you got a disease that gave you a 75% chance of dying. You'd start making life-ending plans. That's what is unique about entrepreneurs. They look at a glass, you talk about the difference between a pessimist and an optimist. A pessimist sees the glass as half empty. An optimist sees the glass as half full. Both are correct. But an entrepreneur sees an opportunity to fill the glass more, right? Entrepreneurs look at the same set of risks and see them completely differently, which is why entrepreneurs make risky decisions. And there is a certain allure and a certain truth in some cases to the adages, no guts, no glory, no pressure, no diamonds, all those, risk, things, very bravado, right? Mm-hmm. And there is a certain truth to that. Your rewards can be proportionate to the degree of risk. It's the way gambling in Vegas is done. If you play roulette on the inside of the table, it's 35-1. Chances are you're not going to hit it. But if you do, you're going to get $35 for every dollar you bet. So there is such thing as risk-reward ratios. But the idea that one should continue to take risks beyond the first year in business, equal to the original risk someone took, is preposterous. I think that's dangerous. And there are risk takers out there. There are people who risk everything. They make us, if they were in Vegas, they'd put $1,000 down on block 23, and now they won 35 times that. You and I would count our lucky stars, put the money in our cash it out and get out of Dodge as fast as possible. Look over your shoulder, right? We would just go, wow, that was luck. Entrepreneurs would just put it down again and again and again, which is why entrepreneurs lose a lot of businesses, because they don't shift the mindset of no guts, no glory, no pressure, no diamonds to mitigated risk. And as your business matures, there's more to lose. When I started my business, there wasn't much to lose, right? Mm-hmm. Today, there's a lot to lose, not just for me, but for the, scores of people who work at my company. They have families and mortgages and car payments and kids that have to go to school and all that stuff. So, we start making less risky decisions. We're more risk averse than we were before. But that's easy to do when you take growth off the table. Will we grow next year? Probably, because we've grown pretty much every year we've been in business. By how much? I don't know. I don't care. I don't care. If we have 30% growth, if we have 3% growth, 0.3% growth, I don't care. What I care about is, are we profitable? Is our team happy? Are we making a difference in the world? Are our customers happy? And growth is what growth is, which sounds very arrogant. And it's easy to say after you've been in business for 30 years. It's hard to think that way when you're just starting. So I get that. That's why it would be hard for me to start over, because I know too many things. And I don't think I would take those risks that allowed the company to start. I think I would be too afraid, because I'm very well aware of what could go wrong. And I've lost that naivety. And so, for me anyway, I had one shot at it, and I was so fortunate that it worked out.
Excellent. And I think this goes into the next thing. You mentioned risks and all those other things. What were some of the specific challenges you had once you started and you were beginning to grow your business?
Oh my gosh. We had competitive challenges because when a competitor comes on board, the mindset is to put them out quickly, kill them quickly before they get a foothold, right? It's like, if they find out you have a tiny little cancer cell, they'll bomb it with radiation and chemo, and kill a bunch of things just because they don't want it to get a foothold. So we were on that end of the battle, and people in our industry kind of knew who I was, but not that much. So when you start a company and you have no track record, there's an issue. Bringing money in is always an issue. Changing the mindset of the buyer is a constant issue. A little less today, but telling them that payment in advance is what they're going to need to do, and in an industry that doesn't do that, we kind of had to set our own trends, and then building the credibility, building the legitimacy of our company, and we do things very differently than other companies in our industry do. And, I spent the first several years looking over my shoulder, being very aware of competitors, and, and we had advertising campaigns that were very braggadocious. We were jerks when it came to advertising. We would put down our competitors and by almost by name, but certainly by inference. And we were just arrogant, and we weren't nice in our advertising. We were brutal. And I used to put on our sales people's computers, I would tape a piece of paper with the acronym LNO. And they'd come to me and go, Mike, what does LNO mean? It means lose no order. Every order we win is a double win. A, we get the order, and B, they don't get the order, so it's a win-win. And so my win-win attitude was basically we were both wins, right? Which doesn't work in a universal world, right? It doesn't work. There has to be some kind of balance. And I didn't know that then. So that was challenging, always fighting a battle, always arguing with somebody in our industry. And then, the advertising was crazy. We were spending way more money than we should have on trade show booths with 30-foot wide waterfalls and video games and drag racing cars in our booth, just to get attention, right? Just to get people in. It was all gimmicks. And then one year, we just had an epiphany. We had a giant waterfall in the booth that was just awesome. And someone came up to us just before the show started, and they said, "Do you mind if we take a picture of your waterfall? It's beautiful." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And then he says, "Is it okay if you move your equipment out of the way so we can get the waterfall?" And it just struck me. I'm like, what the heck are we doing? It's not about our equipment. It's about the waterfall. It's about the race cars. It's about the video games. It's about whatever we're giving away. And what are we doing? We're just making noise. And then our competitors make more noise, and then we make more noise. So we decided, so that was challenging, to answer your question. But we mitigated that by changing our model. We stopped advertising in the magazines. We stopped exhibiting at trade shows. Cold turkey. And we were doing 6 or 7 shows a year. We stopped. Cold turkey. And what did we do? We went into education. We thought, educated people make educated choices. We're going to lead our industry in education. So we talk about, because we're in the cleaning business, we talk about cleaning best practices. We don't talk about our equipment, ever. We sell machines by not talking about our machines. That's our greatest marketing strength right now, is we don't talk about us. We talk about best practice. This is the way one gets the best result. This is the best procedure. This is the best protocol. This is whatever. And we educate. And now, I produce podcasts. where I talk about reliability within the
Reliability
electronics.
Matters podcast.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Thank you. So I talk about everything except what I do. I don't even think I mention what I do, the company I own on the podcast. But it all comes around. It's all, the sales gods are happy with that stuff because it just makes our industry better, makes it richer. So we do podcasts, we do live streams every month on technical topics, nothing to do with our products, just best practice stuff. And I go around the world and I give papers and teach courses and things like that. And I love doing that stuff, as you can tell by the number of words that I've said and the number of words that you've said. I like to talk. So I'm happy there. But it also, it's good for business because it just raises the degree of credibility that our industry has of us because we are connected to our industry. We give back to our industry. We're not just apple pickers. We don't just go pick the low-hanging fruit and fill our baskets and enjoy apple pie. We fertilize the trees through education, knowledge. We tend to the orchard. We don't just pick the apples. We're part of the process. We are the industry, along with our colleagues. They are the industry. And I think when you have that attitude of let's do things that make the whole industry better, it rewards you with all the sales you need. It just works out that way. So the challenge was going to that mindset.
Yeah.
Because you got to shed a lot of other habits and other mindsets to get to that point, and that's not easy.
So speaking of that shedding process, when your business was struggling the most, what exactly inspired you to keep going and moving forward?
That's a great question. I'll give you a point of comparison. Many years ago, Bill Gates was on his way into Microsoft Office, and someone hit him in the face with a pie. He wasn't hurt. If that happened to me and I was Bill Gates, I would say, okay, I've got, $100 billion in the bank. I don't need a pie in my face. I'm out. I would quit right then. Take my 100 billion and, be happy. He went back to work. He kept going. I didn't have $100 billion. So, when I got hit in the face with a pie, so to speak, whether that be an economic condition or a competitor or a lawsuit or whatever, or a business loan being canceled by a bank during the Great Recession of 2008, I didn't have 100 billion in the bank to have the luxury to go, okay, I'm out. I just thought, the old saying, I forget this. I think this may have come from a movie or maybe it was a political thing, but someone once said, don't let the bastards win. And I kind of had that little bit of bravado, like the bastards being either the economic situation or a lawsuit or whatever. Plenty of those out there. But part of me was like, no, we're not going to, we worked hard. We're meant to do this. I have this overwhelming awareness that we are meant to do what we're doing. I don't know why. Who knows? But we are meant to do what we're doing because I've seen too many examples of when we do it, things good happen. They happen. And also it's been my experience that when bad things happen, good things come out of it. And that's just not some like biblical parable or something. I mean, that's my experience. And I don't feel it in real time. I feel it 5 years later. It's like, oh, wow, if it weren't for that, this wouldn't be happening. So I have confidence that when a challenge comes, that I almost think, well, I do think, what am I supposed to learn from this? And sometimes I rack my brain and I'm like, there's nothing good going to come out of this one. This is the first time the universe is failing me, right? This is it. And then, of course, the dust clears and I go, oh, okay, I got it. We need to move this direction. We're no longer here. We're now here. It's clear now. So do I look forward to challenges? No. Do I learn from them, and do we benefit from them? So far, we have, without exception. And I don't have any reason to believe that's going to change. And if it does change, it's me. It's like, I'm not hearing it. I'm not listening loud enough. I'm not willing to hear it, or whatever. The problem would be, here. It would not be out there. But eventually I'm not the smartest person in the room, but smart enough. I'll get it eventually. Or my team will get it way before me and go, dude, come on, look, it's obvious. I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. No, listen. So it works. It just takes time for challenges to become rewards, but it always does.
Great. And, as, sort of, a distinguished speaker and so forth, what advice would you give to sort of new budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, great question. When I started speaking on the lecture circuit many years ago, I suffered pretty severe imposter syndrome. I'm like, they don't know who they let up on this stage because I don't know nothing. I only know this much, where they all know this much, right? I do know something that got me up on the stage, but please don't ask me questions 2 or 3 degrees to the left or right of what I know, because, and I was sweating bullets, and I just thought, I don't belong here. But no one ever tried to out me. No one tried to prove me wrong. Everyone was supportive. And after a few hours at a lectern, I got comfortable, and that's all I do, right? I don't work in my company anymore. My company, which I still own, runs with a team of super talented people, very dedicated, with a culture exactly as I've described what our company has become. They're all just like major supporters of that. So, I now just go around the world and talk. As I said, I produce podcasts for our industry, do live streams, technical live streams for our industry, teach courses at our industry symposium and conferences and things like that, and write papers, and they get published. And I'm in my glory. That's what I love to do. And that came all the way from, I hope they don't ask me a question, I've come a long way from that day. And I don't remember what your original question was. So hopefully that was at least a part answer to your original question.
Yeah. So I was just asking, for young entrepreneurs, what type of advice would you want to give?
Yeah, so don't let imposter syndrome get under your skin. You might question yourself, which is funny because you got to be a little bipolar to be an entrepreneur, because part of you is like all ego. There's nothing you can't do wrong. And then part of you is questioning everything you do, right? And that's you questioning everything you do. So there's bravado and ego, and then there's insecurity, kind of all rolled up into this entrepreneur thing. So don't let that get you. Be aware that you don't know what you don't know. There's a lot of things you don't know, and that's okay, because you don't want to know those out of sequence. You want to know those when it's time to know those things. So just be open. Just be open to learning. Always be learning. Always be learning. I think, there was a time I thought, okay, I'm smart enough. I don't need to learn anymore. Then then the universe kind of shows you how stupid you are, right? So it's like, okay, no, you're not there yet, Mike. And be careful listening to others. And I say that in a guarded fashion, because certainly if you surround yourself with the right people, listen to them. But you don't know who's the right people right away, particularly when you first get started. So listen to your gut. Your gut, your intuition is usually, in humans, pretty good. Listen to your gut. And if it's not settled, there's no harm in waiting. I learned a long time ago, the most profitable word in business is no, not yes. It's no. Because if you say yes to every project that comes along, you're going to run out of money. if you say yes to something slightly out of your wheelhouse, your core competency, you're not going to do it well. Don't try and be everything to everybody. People who are in the middle that are everything to everybody, with some exception, Amazon, good exception. Walmart, probably a good exception. Costco, good exception. They sell everything to everybody. But they're multi-billion-dollar companies. You know, they put billions with a B, billions of dollars into an infrastructure that allow them to do that. We can't do that. There's no harm in being a one-trick pony. You know, everyone says, diversify, you got to diversify. Why? If you can't do something well, why do 10 things you can't do well, right? Do one thing, be the best in the world at it. There was a business author, Jim Collins, who wrote a book called Good to Great. And he studied pairs of publicly traded companies. Pairs meaning a pair of beer makers, a pair of paper companies, a pair of personal hygiene products. Schick and Gillette were good examples. Schick makes shaving cream. Gillette makes shaving cream. They're competitors, but they're in the exact same market, and they sell very similar products. One company did exceptionally well. One company did not. And he took all the pairs of companies, he took all the ones that did well and looked at everything they had in common and all the companies that did poorly and everything they had in common. And he found there was a lot of similarities. Companies that did well all had, you know, I forget how many he listed, but say 10, a list of 10 attributes. And one of those attributes was they all had the right people on the bus, meaning they had the right team. They put a lot of effort into building the right team. The other companies that didn't do that, that didn't do well, they didn't do that. And the other was they basically narrowed their product range down to a handful of products that they could arguably state are best in class. They make the best in class product. You know, I can say, hey, I'm a Mac guy, so I can say, you know, the MacBook Pro is the best laptop, bar none, that anyone can buy. And because Apple believes that, and can, you know, the people will disagree, but they can argue credibly that that product is better than any PC that's ever made, whatever. They can get a premium for their product, right? I pay a whole lot more for my MacBook Pro, which I'm staring at right now, than I do, you know, for a Dell, you know. But they earn that because they concentrate on just a handful of things and they do them all very well. And I think that's what my advice would be to entrepreneurs. Don't be everything to everybody. You have three choices of prices if you want to sell something to somebody. If you're going to build something or you're going to sell something, you can go the lowest price, you could go the highest price, or you can go right in the middle. Guess where most people go? Right in the middle.
Where?
Right in the middle. They don't want to be the highest, they don't want to be the lowest, they want to go right in the middle. Who stands out in the middle? Nobody. Penny's, Macy's, Kohl's, they're all in the middle. They don't stand out. Saks, Nordstrom, higher. They stand out. Walmart, lower. They stand out. Guess who makes the most money? People at the high, people at the low. I don't suggest people get into the low because you need to invest billions of dollars to work on a 5% profit margin, right? You know, Walmart can sell something at a 5% markup and still make money. You can't. I can't. So people feel safe in the middle because they don't want to be the highest because they have this fear-based thinking that if we're the highest, no one's going to buy from us. We're going to be right in the middle. And they think it's safe in the middle. But you can't tell one from the other in the middle. They're all the same. So I like to go straight to the top. If you're going to build a product, if you can truly justify that this is the best-in-class product, then go for the best-in-class price. There are people willing to pay that. It's not everybody. It's not the masses. But it doesn't matter because you'll have enough sales and enough profit margin that you'll be a very healthy company, maybe a little smaller than your middle-of-the-road competitors. But that's okay. It's not a game of size. It's a game of savvy. and security. And so be comfortable smaller. Smaller is sometimes better. Less is sometimes more. No is sometimes better than yes. Those things you just have to be open to receiving if you're ever challenged with that. That would be my basic advice. And just keep going. Live and breathe it. Live and breathe it. Make time for family, because you're going to need your family to support you when things aren't good, and they won't be, and they will be, and then they won't be again. It's a cycle. But just keep going at it. Just be the best in the world. And while you're at it, try and do something good for the world. Try and make it your business mantra to change the world somehow, even in a tiny little way that doesn't even matter a whole lot. It does matter. And if you have a goal bigger than yourself, I think it just lubricates the gears a little bit. For reasons who knows? I can hypothesize all the reasons in the world, but I would probably sound strange. So I think just do right by the world, do right by your customer, do right by your team, and the business universe will do right with you. It just happens. It's kind of a law. As crazy as that sounds, I've lived it, and people I know have lived it, and it works. It's not science. It's universal law. And I know that I don't mean that to sound in a religious way or a spiritual way. Take it that way if you want, but I that's not the way I'm meaning it. I'm meaning it's just one of those truths. Drop a rock, it falls to the ground. That's gravity. Gravity is a universal law, and these are universal laws as well. But we tend to not apply them because they're not taught in science school, but they do work. Any entrepreneur who's been successful can tell you they work.
Excellent way to end this off. Mr. Konrad, this has been an amazing, in-depth interview.
Well, I appreciate the topics that you bring up. I'm glad you reached out, and I watched some of your other guests, and they're all quite interesting. They're all they all have a lot to say, and they are insightful in their own way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
How'd you get into this side of the business? Okay, we'll turn the tables. This is the Mike Konrad Show, talking to Jimbo Paris.
I think it was just passion. I wanted to be a content creator, and I wanted to start creating a blueprint sort of on how to be a person that can conduct these amazing types of interviews. And I think now I'm working on providing sort of a drop servicing business now where I can give that same content to other people, because I've made it up to episode 93. Most podcasts die out around episode 7.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely taken some time, some consistency, but I want to kind of create a business. Well, I have a business now where I make videos, I sell content for other podcasters to maybe make their journey easier than mine.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. I think it was just the passion,
Yeah. In our industry, there are a few podcasters in our industry, but woefully not enough. And which is really ironic, because we're in the high-tech industry. We build the tech. We build everything you use to make a podcast. That comes out of us, right? Anything electronic, we build. And even though we are at the tip of the spear from a technology standpoint, because we build and design the tech, we don't use the tech as much as we should. And I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and particularly in this genre, in business and tech and all that. I think it's great. Well, I'm glad you did it. That was a good move. And we just had our 100th episode just a few weeks ago. So you're almost there. 7 more episodes. You have to have a big celebration.
All right. Appreciate it, Mike. Really has been a privilege.
Yeah, same here, Jimbo. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
So just to end off this show, we're going to do a few little shout outs. First of all, it's Judy Ryan, CEO of LifeWork Systems. She's our collaborative partner, and her goal is to go into big businesses and transform the infrastructure to make it more social, make it more connected, and therefore improving the entire business. And then also, we've got a YouTube channel up there. Subscribe to us now. We're growing in subscribers more and more. We need that support. And then finally, down below, we also are available on the Roku channel. This will be on Roku TV as well as all of our other shows, and you can watch it there. All right. I'm Jimbo Paris, and this is the Jimbo Paris Show. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.